Hi, folks. This is John Kraska, Executive Director for EveryLibrary and the EveryLibrary Institute. It's very nice to be with you today for how to talk to people in power, mostly politicians, that training that we're doing for the Utah State Library. This is being recorded in June 2023. I'm looking forward to another coaching call with everybody later in the month of June 2023. But I hope if you're watching this recording a little bit later, you enjoy it as well. We're going to be talking today about how to talk to politicians and elected officials. The old joke is they're called elected officials if we respect them, like them if they're our person. We call them politicians if we don't. One way or another, though, at any level of government, whether it's local, state, or federal, we have relationships with them for libraries that might be a little bit fraught from time to time, or might be very cordial, very friendly. You even might be, doing some good things with your politicians and your elected officials. I want to think through with you ways to make your effectiveness, your work more effective in having these kinds of conversations. Again, every library's got two parts to our work. Here, let me get my screen out of the way. Every library has two parts to our work. One is our political side. It's a 501c4. It is the Political Action Committee that works on local library funding measures, a lot of the time with voters directly, but we do a tremendous amount of supports for libraries when they're negotiating with city councils, county governments, town boards. We help support legislative portfolios for a number of state library associations, both on the proactive side when it comes to things like state aid for libraries and the budget for the state library, as well as efforts to block or oppose or change legislation that might be onerous for libraries, for librarianship, and for the people we serve. Then on the EveryLibrary Institute side, that's our 501c3 public policy, tax policy, education policy, research, and think tank. What we do there is think through the big issues of how do you write legislation, how do you write ordinances, how do you do budgets for local, state, and federal in ways that support the mission, vision, and values of libraries. So I'm bringing this to you, this conversation today to you from both our practical political side as well as our think tank environment about how do we shape policy. And all those policy issues that we're trying to shape are really driven by agendas. You have an agenda at your library, whether you're the library director, members of the board, leadership team, senior staff, frontline, there's an agenda. I mentioned mission, vision, and values before. Mission, vision, and values are fundamentally an agenda. How do we want to serve? Who do we want to serve? And what does it take to make sure that our service is exemplar? That's usually a funding formula. Oftentimes it's an authority to act. But the agenda between what the library wants and what elected officials or politicians, those people in power, have as their primary reasons to serve themselves, to be in office, to stand or run for election, the disconnects between those agendas sometimes, or even the gap between those agendas, is really the most deleterious part of any of these conversations about how do we talk to people in power. We have a theory or a thesis here at every library in the EveryLibrary Institute about why we should be talking to people in power. It's not storytelling. Storytelling isn't the thing that drives decision making on the part of elected officials or politicians. Why do people in power agree to help solve our problems? It's not the stories. Even though you've been told, if you've attended any other library advocacy trainings over the last, 20 years, that if you simply tell a story, money will blossom from the ground like wildflowers. Stories are nice if you are talking to an audience that is already interested, already engaged, already aligned on common mission, vision, or values. But if they're not yet, if the elected official, whether it's a city council or a mayor, or a county commissioner or supervisor, somebody who's an elected official in Salt Lake, or God bless us in Washington, D.C., they will listen to us and they will begin to work with us if we have successfully mapped our agenda to their concerns. You cannot co-create a solution simply by telling somebody a story about how effective you are. You have to have an alignment between your mission, your vision, and your values, and the reasons those people ran for office in the first place. Now, when we're doing this session today, I want to be very clear that I'm not trying to recruit everyone who's watching this webinar or even participating in the coaching calls. about, I'm not trying to recruit everybody to become a legislative advocate. There's a particular skill set here. And if the thing that happens when you watch this webinar today is you say to yourself, I'm not cut out for this, that's perfect. But if this really sparks your curiosity, if this really moves you in a way that's like, wow, I want to help my library advance their agenda by doing this kind of disciplined approach to having structured conversations with people who have power, then folks, I'm really glad that we can spend some more time together moving forward. Okay, some more theory for you. Why does anybody give you money? And I mean that very sincerely. Why do they give you money? There's two reasons. You're either trying to scale up or replicate your success, or you're trying to mitigate or fix a failure. There's no other good reason to give you funding for the library. And I mean donors, whether it's a $5 donor or somebody's putting you in their will, grant makers and philanthropists, why are they going to give you the grant? Why are they going to make that big donation? Or politicians or elected officials who have you in the budget. Forgive me, there's a third reason to give you money. It's inertia. And in times of want or crisis, the inertial factors get smoothed out in the budget crisis, and we tend to see budget cuts in those kinds of contexts. But new money follows either the opportunity to scale up your success or replicate your success into a different area. This means fundamentally that if you're very effective doing something and you want to increase the number of things that you're doing, the number of people you're impacting, the number of units of support that you're putting out in the world, can you scale it up? Can you add more seats to Storytime? Or can you replicate your success? And with the proper funding, can you replicate your success, say, doing Storytime into something like senior services or entrepreneurship services or support for people in moments of transition or crisis? You've been good at it before somewhere else in the library. With the proper funding, we can replicate that to a new service area. Likewise, stories of failure. We're either going to mitigate or fix a failure. We're going to stop something from happening, or we're going to turn it around. That is a beautiful reason. Fixing that failure is a beautiful reason to give you funding. And elected officials and politicians need to hear whatever the truth is from you about why you're asking. Otherwise, it doesn't actually make any sense for someone who, in advance of their meeting with you about the library, might have heard from a parks department or an education stakeholder, might have heard from another special interest about something as prosaic as infrastructure building, and if you're at a city or county level, asphalt. They might be hearing from the next person after you leave, who is a constituent of theirs, who has an important thing to do. I mean, my goodness, we've walked around in Washington D.C. following health-related organizations as prosaic as the National Headache Association, folks. Like, what's the truth of the matter? What cuts through all of the rhetoric and garbage? Are you either replicating or scaling up your success as a library, or are you mitigating or fixing a failure that the library is uniquely positioned to do? The agenda for your elected official drives everything in the conversation. And I'm going to come back around to your own agenda setting in just a moment. But the agenda that your elected official has, the reason this person ran for office, they took the time to stick their necks out. As an elected official, they wanted to serve. And aside from the real crooks out there, and there's a few, I live in Illinois. We have several of our former governors and secretaries of state in jail right now, or they've served time. There's certain crooks out there, I'll give you that for sure. But the majority of the thousands and thousands of Americans who serve in city, county, state, and federal office are people of integrity and people who are serving in good faith, whether I agree with all their policies or not. In the main, somebody runs for office in order to do one of five things primarily. They want to make more interesting places. And at the local level, at a city level, that's very easy to see. Are we an interesting place to live? At the city, county, state, federal level, do we have thriving places? Are people able to find their economic attainment, their personal attainment, their well-being? All the things that go into education, all the things that go into health, what makes us community connections? The people serve in elected office because they want prosperity. to happen for their constituents. They want to see people succeed. They want to see, wow, could we all make a decent living? Could we all have some economic justice? Could we all get the hand up without the hand out? People run for office, they stand for election, they serve as elected officials or politicians to do things like efficiency in government as well. A lot of duplicative services out there. How can we make government smaller in order to make it more successful? And how can we deliver efficient services in that way that says we are all in this democratic republic together? The agendas of your elected officials in many of these places, I'm sorry, in many of these agenda items here, interesting places, thriving places, prosperous places, libraries are hidden. Libraries are embedded in each of these three things. I mean, your programming and interesting, your educational and health and well-being programs in thriving, your economic development work, your job skills work in prosperous, but the dots have not been connected. And the opacity of what libraries do. Story time, the biggest thing that we do in public libraries every year. Story time is part of interesting and thriving and prosperous because it gives families something to do that's fun. It helps kids get rolling in the right direction for school readiness, and all of the economic and social determinants that happen because of literacy that starts during a lap sit or sing an itsy bitsy spider. Folks, no one besides you can connect the dots. Now, there's the duplicative services and the efficiency and effective services. I have to say, I've been in this industry, in this sector for 20 years. I can't think of a more low-cost, high-impact way to put a small amount of smart tax money to work and to consolidate effort within an established community anchor institution like the library, so we don't duplicate things across literacy, economic development, across different sorts of health infrastructures. Folks, we need to understand their agendas as elected officials and map our work to that. It starts not with just talking points, though, about your own agenda. It starts with fundamentally a deep understanding of the problem solving that you're trying to do, either by scaling up or replicating your success or mitigating or fixing failures in your communities. Elected officials have two questions that you need to provide legitimate answers for in order for them to make an informed decision about whatever the ask is that you have. These are two legitimate questions that need legitimate answers. They're valid questions that need legitimate answers. They might never ask them. You might need to anticipate their interest. And they are, what happens to the people or this place that we call home when the library gets new funding? What happens? What are the expected and hoped for outcomes for people or for this place? Because some folks who are in elected office really care about people. Other folks who are in elected office really care about places. And then the second thing that they need to hear an answer to, a legitimate answer to, is what happens to these people that I love or this community that I'm so proud of if the library does not receive the new funding? The reason storytelling doesn't work in library advocacy, and it never has, I don't know why we've been doing it for 20 years, the reason that storytelling doesn't work is because if we tell somebody a story who does not understand what we do, our story sounds like we're nice people, and then we ask them after we tell them a story to solve our problem for us. We, as the library advocates, need to lay out what the solving problem is, and what happens if we do it, and what happens if we don't. Those elected officials are not experts in librarianship. You are. They are not elected to your library board. You are. We have to understand the inventory of features that will be added to the library with new funding. And it's the features that drive new outcomes, or it's the absence of a feature that sets up a situation that's negative for those people we love in this community that we serve. It could be collections, technology, facility, staffing, programs. The expected and hoped for outcomes are only definable by you. And for those to be legitimate answers, what happens? What's going to happen if we do this policy, funding, authority, law? What happens if we do this budget? What happens if we make this change locally? And likewise, what problems are either going to persist or deepen for the people or for the community if we are unable to do something with new features. Okay, so let's think this through together before I give you some very practical advice about how to prepare for a meeting with an elected official or politician. What's the problem you're trying to solve? I have a worksheet for you. It's part of the desk. It's part of the handouts for this webinar, and I need you to think through in very deliberate ways on that workshop. What problem are you trying to solve? What population or part of the community, the people we love or this place we call home, are affected by the problem? How will those people or this place change in a positive way if we are able to do our work? And what is the ask that will solve that problem? Then I need you to consider why the elected official should act at all. You always have to ask yourself, and I'm starting this not with a target of a particular elected official to talk to. This isn't a situation where I'm suggesting that you talk with Representative Sweeney. What we look at is what the problem is, and who do we need to ask in order to help solve that problem or forestall that problem? It might be Representative Sweeney because Representative Sweeney is on the right committee. It actually might not be. It might not be anybody in your own backyard. But who do we need to ask? Do they, that politician, already identify your problem as a real problem? If not, I've got some work to do with you. Why would they want to see your problem solved? This is a legitimate question that you have about why do you go into the room? Do they actually identify your problem and do they want to see that problem solved? Sometimes you don't go to the meeting because you know you have a block and you have to figure out a way around it. However, if they already identify your problem, and I'm going to show you how in a minute to understand if they do or don't. If they already identify your problem as a real problem, and if they do want to see your problem solved because we know about their agenda from how they present themselves publicly or privately, then letter D, we have to be able to answer this question. What are we asking them to do? We have to have the answer to that question ourselves. Because if we cannot articulate for them what we need to see changed in law, statutes, or budgets, regulations for that matter, we have no business going into that meeting. These are people of action, and they have the ability to change the law of the land. What do you want them to actually do in order to make this problem not just simply disappear, but be solvable by the library? How will they do that thing that you're asking them to do? Is it a new law? Is it a new budget? Is it a new authorization? Or is it some sort of a new appropriation? I mean, there's a lot of different mechanisms under the way we're structured in this country, in this democratic republic of ours, where cities and counties can act in a particular way, states can as well, and the feds certainly have their own place. Congress is not the only actor here. In Utah, you've got a lot of federal agencies and a lot of state jurisdictions overlapping. How will they accomplish this change to either law or the budgets that you need? And then the biggest question also for preparatory work for any meeting with an elected official is when. When are they able to do it? We've seen time and time again advocacy campaigns coming out of library organizations saying that we want to see more school librarians. Great. The Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1965 is only amended, or modified, reauthorized every 10 years or so. The last time it was done was in, previous to the 2015 reauthorization with the Every Student Succeeds Act. It was 2020 with No Child Left Behind. Folks, unless there's some moment in how government works that you can change the law or change the budget. We see this with city councils all the time. People are like, well, we need to save the library, but they don't show up to the budget hearings until well after it's over. Or they're showing up way before it starts. There is a timeliness, there's a regular order to these things. And if we don't understand when the elected official can do it, all we are doing to that elected official is making a noisy meeting happen. All right, so we need to have two things in our back pocket before we go into any meeting with people in power. Plan A, what happens if we get it? We're asking for the funding or the authority to do better work as libraries so that we can properly address a problem for a community or for a population. And then we need to demonstrate Plan B as well. What happens if we don't receive the funding? How do we say it means we can't or we won't? It's not that we're not willing or hopeful. Heck, we're going in there to ask about Plan A. We would like to solve this problem, but if we're unable to because nothing changes in the city or the county, nothing changes at the state house, nothing changes with Congress, if we don't receive that new funding or authority, it means we can't or won't address a problem that will persist for an affected population that elected official cares about, or this place you both call home. We will continue to do our best, but we will be inadequate to the task. This takes courage in our preparations. It takes honesty. It takes authenticity in the answers we're trying to give to these elected officials who are not paying any attention until you show up for that meeting in any substantive way to what your library is doing, until you build that relationship. All right, let me show you just a real quick cheat sheet. This is in your worksheets. I will not let you leave the building to have this conversation with an elected official or a politician until you can describe to me the feature that you want to see enhanced or added, what population or part of your community is being impacted by it, and that you need to be able to describe why you're asking for that feature with the phrase so that we can serve, so that we can scale up our success in helping that population of this community, so that we can fix crises, we can avert failure. But it means we won't. If we don't get this funding, Representative Sweeney, it means we won't be able to do something to make a more thriving place, a more interesting place, a more prosperous place. It means that we will not be able to fix some of these deficiencies in how government works, and we'll be leaving the people we care about or this place we call home behind. This is an important exercise, folks, because it allows us to start to map what we do and what we need to what those elected officials or politicians care about. All right, I'm going to take you into the worksheets in just a second here. I want to orient you to the worksheets. And then even before I get started, I want to make an offer to you. Through this relationship that we have with the State Library in Utah, EveryLibrary and the EveryLibrary Institute are very happy to work with you one-on-one with small groups of your leadership teams at your library to think this thing through. I'm not dropping the worksheets on you and walking away. My contact information is at the end of this webinar. We are interested in, and we're capable of working with you individually to move this project forward. All right, so we're going to build a dossier about elected officials. These elected officials at all levels of government, folks, have a public profile. And we're going to look at their public profile. The tremendous insights that we will gain from this is to understand their agenda, not ours. It's to understand how eventually, though, we can map our fundable agenda to their issues. We want to see new funding to extend success or fix failure on a particular set of features that will help us serve populations or place better. And we're going to create this dossier. I want to look at anticipating their position on your plan A so that we can, and your plan B so that what happens if we can't. And to take a look at their constituents and what topics are of deep concern to them. All right, everyone here on the webinar, I'm going to ask you to open up your worksheets, but I'm also going to do a very awkward thing on any webinar, which I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a moment. Hi, nice to see you. I'm going to go back into my slides and bring up the dossier. And now I will go back into sharing my screen. It's very exciting. I'll go back into sharing my screen and take you through what you have on your worksheets. All right? Great. Well, folks, again, every elected officials at all levels of government, their public profile, this dossier, this worksheet that we're going to be working on together, or you could do it yourself. I don't mind. I'm okay with that. Basics, name, campaign, what district they're serving. This might be city of, this might be ward or council district. It might be congressional district. How long they've been in office, but then what's their social media? Who's their spouse? What's their day job if they have one? Some of them are permanent elected officials. Some of them do things like ranching and real estate or education, and what's their educational background. I want to know the difference between somebody who's a lawyer, somebody who's an educator, somebody who's got their master's degree in nursing or business. The offices and official positions. Folks, this is a very important area here. What committees, regardless of what level of government, what committees are they assigned to? Every city council has a budget committee. Every city council's got a infrastructure committee. Every city council's got a review an audit committee, and there's a lot of other committees. Every state, every member of Congress sits on some committee or another. It might be finance, it might be education, it might be labor, it might be pensions, it might be science, it might be banking. So where do they spend their time as an elected official? They're not randomly assigned to these things. They want to be assigned to these things. Some of these committees are plum assignments. What caucuses do they participate in? And by caucuses, I mean, we've all heard, I would assume, the Congressional Black Caucus, where African American elected officials in Congress get together to talk about issues that are affecting the African American community. And they bring up legislative initiatives in Congress that support and benefit that caucus community. There are caucuses for everything. There are caucuses for special interests and unique populations, from the environment to the to particular populations of students, to different ethnic groups, to different topics of emerging interest and concern. I know one state right now, by the way, that has a library caucus. That's Massachusetts. What do they serve on? Then I'd ask you to please take some time and look at their recent bills. What bills did they support? What bills, forgive me, what bills did they introduce? What bills did they co-sponsor? Because those are different kinds of bills. They originate bills for one of three reasons. They want that topic addressed. They are doing it as a favor to a constituent, or it got dropped on them by some other elected official. The top two are very interesting. You can be number two, by the way. What do they sponsor? And this even goes for city councils. You could use the word ordinance here rather than bill. If you just want to look at it thematically, they're into something like education. They're into something like financial reform. They do a lot on the environment or support for military families. And who are their frequent co-sponsors? Because we want to understand ways into their office beyond their above and beyond their own front door. Of course, we need to know their party alignment, and if they've made any statements, whether we're talking about city council, county government, state, or federal, on libraries, archives, and museums, and these broader humanities issues that intersect. This is all fact-finding and data gathering. All right, I want to know what their next election date is. I want to know who their fundraising chair is, or their treasurer, and who their large donors are, both individually and institutionally. It's very interesting what happens when you take a look at their money, and to see how that matrix of donors, that matrix of not just corporate sponsors, but individual influencers relates. This goes for local electeds as well as state and federal. When are they on the ballot, and who's helping to support them on their path to the ballot? And then I'm very interested from a campaign perspective if they have a campaign slogan, and I need a link from you and some understanding about their campaign agenda or platform. Are they looking to make America great again? Are they looking to build the village that it takes to serve all children? You know, where is it? Is their campaign slogan very self-centered, or is their campaign slogan very population-centered? Folks, it's fascinating what they will tell us. And we need to know, because we have to be able to map the million and one things that your library does to the things that they're running to do. All right, I'm gonna keep scrolling down here. On their media side and their PR side, what's some of their recent PR? What have they talked about? What have they released about themselves? News stories about them, it's always good to know going into the room whether or not they're getting good press or not. What key topics do they post about on their own social media? Are they a firebrand? Are they a bridge builder? Are they focused on particular issues that really just are very policy? And what's their tone? These are all important aspects of understanding the nature and character of that elected official or politician. To understand these sort of self-image questions is to understand who on your library team should go take the meeting. Not everyone lines up perfectly with every elected official in every meeting situation. There are times where you need to send somebody other than yourself as a leader. To understand that is very important, and you need to know how you would be received personally and professionally versus who do you need to use as the correct emissary for your institution's issues, for your plan A and your plan B. All right. Then I want to be able to take a moment and think about if there are any special interests that this elected official has that are already represented in the library's agenda. If the elected official has already made statements above, okay, going up in this, has the elected official made statements not just about libraries, but about a population or a particular piece of identity or place that you're like, I got this person. We've already got them. They're really into biking and transportation, and we've got the only library in the Front Range that does programs for bikers or for biking, not bikers. That's different. We got this guy. We got this gal. We know because they have been sponsoring bills about brewing, and we offer classes at our place about brewing. Like, what's your hook? They care very much about ADA compliance, and they are proud of their work helping to support people who have mobility issues or low vision or are blind. Have we got a collection for them? So those special interests, I would like to be able to ask you then a couple key questions. And if it, so you go back, you look at this, you figure out what they care about. Interesting place to live, thriving place to live, prosperous place to live. And do they have things that are their pet projects, their special interests? And then let's map it. How is their special interest or special project impacted by your agenda? Again, that plan A agenda of increase or that plan B situation of diminishment. How will the special interest be impacted by a positive change? How will the special interest be impacted by a negative change? Does the elected already identify your problem as a real problem? I asked you that earlier. This is the time to get really serious about it. Do they already identify the problem that you're trying to solve is a legitimate problem? If not, we have to work on our education before we can work on activation. We have to tell them more about it than simply walking in the door and saying, hey, we got a problem that you already identify. For a population that we both love or a place we both call home, we have to do a lot more education. Why would they want to see your problem solved? Then back to those key questions. What are you asking the elected to do? How will they do that? And when are they able to do it? Folks, if we can pull all of this together, we start with our mapping our features to the elected officials' agenda. Just give me three of them. It's people who work at your library. It's the collection that you have. It's the programs that you're trying to do. It's the services you're able to offer and the place that you're able to do it in. What population or community is impacted? Here's your laundry list so that we can. It means we won't. You can photocopy this page time and time and time again. We will work on components of the message box when we do one-on-one conversations, and I'll get you there, about moving into a conversation when we are a little bit opaque about whether they like us or not. But then what I want you to anticipate is what happens in a meeting. I'm going to come back to the, so this is your worksheet. I'm going to come back now. Hello, I'm back. I'm going to come back to the slides. let me talk to you about what happens when we take the meeting. Okay, so when we want to take the meeting with the elected official, we've done all of that dossier work, we've done all that thinking through, we've done all of that prep work, and we're ready to go in the door. You have the meeting. You're going to hear 5 things. Well, potentially 5. There might be 4. It might be 3. The 3 you're definitely going to hear are bright spots, hot spots, and what ifs. My apologies on number 2. It should say hot spots. I will correct that for the slides in the PDF. Bright spots, hot spots, and what ifs. The hot spots idea here being the most important. Yeah, bright spots are nice. They tell you you're great. They love libraries. Oh, you're doing the Lord's work. That's nice. And there might actually be more legitimate bright spots there where they say, you know what, I've been meaning to sponsor a bill. Hey, we've got an ordinance coming up. We would like to fix the budget because we've got a surplus this year. But the hot spots are fundamentally where the leadership comes into play here for the library. Do they not understand what you do? Do they not understand who you are? Are there prevailing social or political issues that are affecting your ability to have a good conversation? The other thing that you might hear when you have a conversation about the library in your agenda that's mapped to their agenda, what if? That's a great idea, John. What if we did X or Y for those populations we care about? What if we did A, B, or C for this place we call home? Then, when you're in the meeting, the 2 other things that you may or may not have to do, but I'd listen very hard for them, are follow-ups and commitments. When you're talking to Representative Sweeney, and he does not understand what you're talking about because he's not much of a policy guy himself, he might be on the wrong committees for his own talents, but he likes to serve on judiciary or education. What follow-ups does he need in terms of education about what libraries do and who librarians are? What follow-ups does he need in terms of the structure of government conversations or the structure of the budget conversations? And then the 5th one is a magical moment. If they've made a commitment to do something, this is the strongest thing that you can do when you're talking to somebody in power, is to hold them to their commitments. You know, John, that was a really interesting thing. I think that we can or should. I'd like to see if we can or should. We should. Those commitments need to be followed up with real alacrity, and it drives the next phase of the conversation, which is co-creating a policy or budgetary framework that changes the future for your community or this place you call home. Now, there's some general meeting advice. Usually, if you're going to be doing legislative days or places where there's a little bit more excitement, even if you're doing more of a private meeting, but that it does have some sort of opportunity to lead to something, take a picture, ask to share it, use their social media, make sure that you're seen in the environment of them supporting libraries and you supporting their love of the institution, the people that you serve in this place you call home. All right, team. It's an interesting conversation, I hope, and one that will help move you forward. Again, my commitment to you here at EveryLibrary and the EveryLibrary Institute is to help you think this thing through, and to help you move these conversations from theoretical into practical. I appreciate the State Library of Utah for offering this kind of a webinar and for giving us an opportunity to meet with you and to spend a little bit of time today. Those of you who are doing the live coaching calls later in June, it'll be a very good conversation. But folks, my email address is here, and I invite you to be part of it. I invite you to avail yourself of it. We want to be a part of your success. Thank you so much. Be well.